Chair. And welcome back to the March 5th, 2019 special meeting of Glendale City Council. May we have the roll call, please?
Council members Agajanian.
Present.
Devine.
Here.
Garpetian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Mayor Sinanian.
Here. May we have the report, please?
The agenda for the March 5th, 2019 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Friday, March 1st, 2019 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. What's next?
Next is Director of Community Development regarding Art and Entertainment District Workshop. 1A is a motion to report and file this guided discussion and workshop on the Arts and Entertainment District on Artsakh Avenue and nearby alley.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, we are before you this afternoon with the first workshop as it relates to the Arts and Entertainment District, and in particular, really the Artsakh Paseo that includes the two-block portion of Artsakh as well as the alleyway that goes behind Artsakh Street. With that, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hiramoto, who is here with us this afternoon to take you through the PowerPoint presentation that was provided to you as part of your packet, as well as Mr. Calvert from Community Development, who will, I think, have pieces of the presentation. And this is akin to the way we went through the process for the downtown specific plan, in terms of having the number of workshops in place, taking a break in between and gaining some feedback from the City Council to help us and the consultant to make sure that ultimately your vision is implemented within that area. So we ask that you, I think Jennifer's going to say, have fun with this process. Tell us what you think and what you envision, and we will take copious notes, and hopefully ultimately, once this entire project comes to fruition, it will really be something that you all will be very proud of. So with that, Ms. Hiramoto.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Many times the City Council is asked to fix problems. Today's conversation will be very different. Today is really a question of possibilities, of opportunities, and as we go through many of the images which you've seen today, hopefully this sparks something in you. Perhaps you'll see an image that really speaks to you. You may see something that you say you love and we must have in the Arts and Entertainment District. You might see an element of that image that you would like. You may simply see something that you hate and do not want in the Arts and Entertainment District. We would like to hear all of that today. We also have members from our Studio 111 team. They will be taking copious notes and bringing back some of your comments later in the presentation today. This is a multidisciplinary effort. There we go. So we also have Mark Berry on the team, Gary Schaefer as we talk about public art, and then Philip Lancefame and Darlene Sanchez as well. So essentially there are 6 big questions that we'll ask you to answer, and in the similar vein to DSP, we will pause at the conclusion of each of those to try to get your feedback on those. You have heard many times now, and this is actually through Council's direction, Studio 111 is tasked with reimagining the Arts and Entertainment District. Through that RFP, we're really looking to elevate the character and qualities of Artsakh Avenue, as well as that public alleyway and passages, as Ms. Beers mentioned. Some of the program objectives include enhancing the alley, looking at streetscape, public art, landscaping, providing guidance on improvements to some of the privately owned pedestrian passages, making it more pedestrian friendly, and maintaining adequate accessibility to parking. You will see here, this is just the canvas that Studio 111 has to work with. It is not a blank canvas, and as we've spoken about many times, there are some constraints. Access to the parking garages is among them. Studio 111 has started its due diligence and info gathering stages, and this slide shows that along Artsakh Avenue, there's different characteristics between the northern and the southern block. You're very familiar with these, so I won't spend too much time speaking about these. And then we have the existing alley and passageways. The public alley, the service alley that runs parallel between Artsakh Avenue and Brand, is really a great opportunity to activate. But we also have other passageways that link the Arts and Entertainment District to brand, and you may have some ideas on how we continue to identify those nodes. So as we look at defining the identity for the Arts and Entertainment District, one of the leading questions for you as City Council is really, what do you want this place to be? These are some of the big questions, big picture items that the Studio 111 team will need in order to move forward with the design. Are you envisioning that this is a place that will be for kids and families with an emphasis on kid-friendly public spaces? Are you envisioning that this will be an adult playground with breweries, a place where maybe even open containers are permissible? Or perhaps you would like it to be very true to its name and have it be an artist colony with visual art, pops of color, and interactive art components. So what are we talking about when we discuss some of these? A place for kids and families. Elements that make a street kid-friendly include temporary games, like pictured in Detroit, permanent play equipment, such as the mini trampolines in Copenhagen, as well as places to climb, like in Boulder, and water features, a place where kids can play with water in Oslo and Toronto. Getting back to this adult playground element. So this is a place where you may want to see more breweries, comedy clubs, and allowing open containers. Some of the live entertainment venues and pubs, like seen here in New York and Nashville, seem like they could fit very well in the future Arts and Entertainment District. There could be casual hangout areas like pictured here in Boston's Yard at D, and outdoor events like the Silent Disco, which again, it actually looks very similar to that alley that I just showed as well. Or getting back to this artist colony. So it is the Arts and Entertainment District. Are you envisioning that this is a place where you can have art on the walls, as shown in Paris, Sydney, and Italy, or on the pavement, as shown in Chile, with paint, or Vancouver with projections? These all might make art easily accessible for visitors and support in arts and culture. So really, I mean, this is part of the identity for an arts and entertainment district. And I'll just pause here. Is there anything that speaks to you in these images or in one of these categories? Do you like all of the above? Do you like none of the above? Do you like a collection of each? And it's okay to say yes to all or no to all as well. So I'll open it up to the council.
Councilmember Al-Janian.
So there is no problem, thank you, Mayor. There is no problem to have all of them together, right? It shouldn't be one or the other. We can have all three items in Artsakh Paseo.
That is correct. You can have all three items within the Arts and Entertainment District. What's unique about this space is that because you have that service alley that we discussed, there may be elements here that would fit very nicely that might have a more adult vibe within that service alley. And there may be elements that actually lend themselves to both a place for kids, but you can also have adults there, and you can even have events that cater to an adult crowd for special events. So you can absolutely have all three.
It's very appropriate to think of this in zones, if possible. You have multiple different size spaces. They're fronted by different things. They can be programmed in many ways. So exactly your question, can you have it all? You certainly can. And that's something that can be explored through the design process and try to identify where those things are most important. I think what would be nice to learn is if there is a priority. There doesn't have to be, but if there is a priority of one concept over another, that would be something that would be very useful for the design team to move forward with.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think combination of most of them, the alley, as you mentioned, it's I think for adult vibe, if you will, to have little concerts there or plays or outdoor parties or what have you. I saw breweries here. I'm not against having breweries there, but not the entire thing. I mean, maybe one just to start with, and have comedy clubs, a salsa club for us, restaurants with entertainment, so it will draw different crowds. And also the water feature, I it's important to me. The kids' playground elements or equipment for kids or games for kids is important. Maybe daytime could be a different, it will attract a different crowd, and 10 o'clock on when the kids are at home and in bed, you attract a different crowd. I think it has to be kind of a multi-purpose area. And as far as the open container idea, the timing of it, what is the timing that you had in mind when you said, breweries with open container? Open container, you mean having drinks and walk around with drinks? Is that what you're talking about, or what is it that we're talking about? What is the open container?
It's precisely that. It is allowing for in a designated space and designated times to allow folks to walk around with alcohol.
So it's a designated space like we have the beer garden that they have at Alex sometimes, when we have this outdoor areas. Okay, or
Correct.
Montrose has it too, they have
Yes,
the beer.
correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I have a question about the comedy club. Why specifically comedy club?
It was just a recommendation of one of the possible uses, and we'll get into this discussion later, but there's a very unique opportunity that the city has now that we own those retail units, and there's also a large, some other opportunities on the street. Some of them are such as Pier Garden. So that may be a future use that we suggest to some of the private landholders. Comedy club, again, is one of the ways to activate it, but it's certainly not the only idea.
Right, I understand.
It's thinking about how the store frontages could be used. We are in a very unique position to be able to activate those in a preferred way. So thinking about what could go in there that reflects the character of that street, of that primary spine, and how do you want that to support one another?
Okay. I like the idea of these zones. I like having a mix that serves different constituents and different contingents. And hate is a very strong word. You used it. But I haven't seen anything that I dislike so far. So
Great.
as far as ideas, I think I like the way we're thinking out of the box and considering all the possibilities. Yes. Ms. Devine?
Comment. So I went through and yes, no, yes, no. Place for kids and families. We are going to have traffic on that street, right? Whether it's one-way or two-way, there's going to be traffic there, right?
Correct. It will still be a functioning street. There are measures in which we can slow down traffic, but it will not just, for the most part, it will be a functioning street.
So with that in mind, I didn't see it as a playground for kids. I see it more as an adult area. I think possibly you could take kids there, being mindful of what's going on around you. But I think if it was closed, it would be great. It would be absolutely great. I think that's shown in these pictures. I think most of these spots are closed streets, like Santa Monica or, I don't know, it looks like Copenhagen or Toronto are closed streets. Well, maybe not that one, but.
There could be opportunities to close portions of it. Part of this study will look at that traffic flow, and are there opportunities where that could be turned into a people space, essentially. So how we would like to activate that, I guess that's one thing about some of these sort of provocations is that not necessarily limited in what we can do. We can explore it and then come back and report.
Okay.
It wasn't possible to close the street, so maybe that takes that out of play at that point.
Just keeping that in mind, if we have a zone where they're, it's kid-friendly, then we should be mindful of the safety. So breweries, comedy, I think whatever we can put in this space that will attract adults is going to be terrific. It will work. It will work. The artist colony, I love the idea of colors. Let's see, I had some other visual arts. I love that idea. I think all of that brings warmth and it attracts people to a space. Now, we're only talking about, are we talking about from Wilson to Harvard?
We are.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
I hope so.
Right. Yeah,
Yes.
well, me too.
We are.
I mean, okay, yeah, so we'll be working on that. So there are a lot of options, because it's a pretty large, large space. So those are my comments. So yes on the visual arts, the pops of color, and those interactive art components, it will be another draw for visitors and, for photo ops, and, people will love that. So I'm all in favor of those as well.
Just to address the issue of the children's safety, I think there have to be engineering solutions out there that would make a safe area for children possible, even with the one-way traffic. It's limited traffic. It's mostly for egress and ingress from the parking lot. But there must be a children's component to the paseo, because we don't want to exclude families with children from coming downtown and specifically coming to Artsakh Paseo. We want them to come. We want them to know that when they come, their children are going to have a spot. They're going to have things to do. And that's one way to attract the adults, too, by making sure that there are things for children to do on the Paseo. So I would strongly advocate for children's area to be, and children's functional areas to be included in this.
So,
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ajari?
so my thoughts are, yes, I think we do need to have art throughout, on the ground, on the walls, in the air. I don't want to go too heavy on the kids. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want like a Chuck E. Cheese there, or a Color Me Mine, or a place where they're going to be having birthday parties. I prefer to see more of an adult. And when I say more of an adult, even not so much breweries. I mean, when you say breweries, you're talking about a different segment of the adult population with a different vibe. I'd like to see something a little more upscale throughout, upscale restaurants, upscale drinking establishments, not, come without your T-shirt, without a shirt, and, have your beer party outside or anything like that. I'd like to see something a little more sophisticated in at least the main area. Not to say that those little side alleys can't be used for, the birthday parties or the beer halls, but both in terms of dining, in terms of drinking, in terms of retail. I imagine retail is an important component as well. Higher end, not the lower end sort of stuff. I don't want a dollar store there. I don't want a Miss Kitty store there. I mean, I think it's got to be a little bit upper scale than
It's like Hello Kitty store? Is that what
Hello Kitty.
Is that not, it's not upscale? It's, I mean, I don't know.
Hello Kitty is.
No, I mean, in terms of, the type of vibe we want to create there.
So one thing in terms of retail that I thought may be contributing, because it's also artsy, is maybe having like an atelier for, clothes makers for high-end clothes. I mean, that kind of thing, where it's not a department store, but it's a boutique.
Like a boutique.
Yeah, like a boutique tailor shop that. Anyway, I think
just
the world is
general-
your oyster. I mean, you can look
General
at all these ideas and.
But
So shoes and shirts required.
I was going to say, I'm all for that, no T-shirts and,
I mean, you kind of get that with breweries. Have you been to a brewery lately? I mean, you get all kinds. Guys coming back from, softball games, and they're all like, This is a special place. We've got Golden Road. I mean, they want to do that, they can go to Golden Road. But if you want to have a nice drink, a nice atmosphere, nothing too rowdy. I mean, I don't want a rowdy place. Let's put it that way. Having fun is great, but, like rowdiness, no. I don't think we should encourage rowdiness. That'll scare away the serious adults and the young families with children as well.
I think
Mr. Carpenter.
a great example of it is, of course, it's on a bigger scale, is the City Walk at the Studio City. They have restaurants that they're salsa bars, but at night, 10 o'clock at night, the outdoor seating area turns into a dance floor, and they have high-end, as you mentioned, clientele coming in, and also keeping in mind the international vibe that we want to generate. We talked about it, that to have an international vibe. I think it's part of the, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'll wait until that we have that part. You're not done with your presentation, are you?
No, we're
Okay,
not.
okay, so that's fine. So I'll wait for that.
The one thing I would add, and that's a really good point, while we may control some of the storefronts, we don't control all of them. So when you're thinking about that kind of energy that you want to create, that kind of atmosphere, when we're talking about these moves, whether it's art, programming, things like that, keep those in mind. You know, do those support the kind of vision, the kind of uses that you would like to see in those spaces?
Okay.
Excellent.
Have we mentioned a gallery? That's a good
An art
part-
gallery?
Yeah, an art gallery would be, since it's arts and entertainment.
Yes.
Gallery would be very
Absolutely.
nice there.
So, great segue then regarding the international component. So one of the elements that was not included when we first released the RFP was the inclusion of Artsakh as there was a name change midway. And this presents I think a very unique opportunity, and we're really looking for council direction on whether this is something that you would like to build upon, and if so, how would you envision it? If this is, if you would like to incorporate elements of Artsakh, is it through incorporating it in design, or is it part of a larger international theme? And it may be through both. So one way of looking at this is through design. If you look at this as, Artsakh can be introduced through streetscape by including references to iconic imagery, cultural artifacts and inscriptions in street art, or through commemorating historical events through paving or other street elements as shown on the top right. There may be other subtle ways to incorporate Artsakh, and essentially, paying homage to the Armenian culture through the region's language, through colors, color patterns, and through some of the other artwork. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is you can use this as a jumping off point and find a way to include this as part of a larger international theme. You could celebrate Glendale's diversity, you could still pay homage to Artsakh and provide further context about what this means, but you can also look at some of the other examples here where an international theme can be reinforced through culturally inclusive signs, such as Grand Park, or sister city signs. I know Glendale has many, as shown in the example from San Francisco. Other ways are to create international themes are banners and flags representing the various cultures found in Glendale, or referencing iconic places in other parts of the world, such as the Kafisjian Art Center in Yerevan, and hosting globally traveling exhibits like we saw recently with the Eyewitness exhibit. So these are just two different ways of looking at it. Again, I will pause here because we really haven't had this conversation as a council on how would you like to integrate the name, if at all, or build upon it in the Arts and Entertainment District.
If you don't mind. So I think those two blocks are large enough where you can have an homage to Artsakh. It is called Artsakh Avenue. But at the same time, not do that at the expense of having a broader cultural expression on those two blocks. I think you can have both. And how that's done is, again, there's probably a myriad of ways to do that. And it's just a matter of finding the most tasteful and tasteful way, but also the way that'll speak to the broader international theme. Mr.
I agree with Mr. Mayor. I think this is a large enough area that we can have our cake and eat it too, if you will. But as far as Artsakh goes, I think having maybe one specific use from Artsakh is important. Maybe that there is a very authentic bread, the Zingalov hot.
So there was someone.
Right. There was a request to maybe have that business there that is a very authentic bread from Artsakh, bakery from Artsakh, and that would be maybe a hub to just represent. Also, there is a famous dog, if I'm not mistaken, from Artsakh, that there's an artist that is started making these dogs in a scale that it's life, what do you call it, lifelike scale, and they want to donate those. So it's part of the, it's an art piece as well. So I think, but at the end, the international component, I think it's very important to show the diversity that we have in our city. But as far as Artsakh goes, I think one use and some arts and pieces of arts throughout the district would be great. And one thing that I don't want to use the word hate, but I dislike a lot, and everybody knows that, murals. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. I'm not a big fan of them, so I don't mind, color on the buildings, art pieces on the buildings, but murals, I'm not a huge fan of.
Thank you. Mr. Najarian?
So I agree. Generally, we have to have some visual cues to Artsakh, and you provided some in the previous slide, whether it's the Babik and the Dadik statues or the flags, or there are many out there. I think we need to put some sort of information plaque or display, because people still say, well, what's Artsakh? And depending who you ask, it's spun a different way. And we want to make sure that we tell the right side. I'd love to have a retail store selling products from Artsakh, wine, and they've got a great homemade brandy, jams, jellies. There's all sorts of rugs that they do. I mean, if we're thinking, and the city has the ability, and I don't even know who's out there that can do that, but I think that would help add to the flavor. And it would be high, it's a high end. It's not like a trinket store type of thing. It'll have high end, and I think it might bring some traffic as well to folks who are sampling, along with the bakery and perhaps a few other things that will lend that. It definitely shouldn't be all Artsakh related things, but just a few to bring out a character that obviously we're trying to put on that street.
Correct. Thank you.
Yes.
I don't disagree with anything that my fellow council members have said. I think we have to pay homage to Artsakh. After all, we have named the street Artsakh Plaza or Paseo. And I like the idea of the stores, the shopping, and I think that gives it the flavor. And that could even bring in other international retail to that area that people would be interested as well. Because, as has been said, we have a lot of different communities and diversity in our city. I like the idea of an icon for Artsakh. I think that right away, something like that draws attention to the area. I think it's a photo op, which people love, and so I'd be in favor. I don't like putting things on the ground like that, so those kinds of suggestions would be out as far as I'm concerned. But the icon, the statue of some sort, and I think the dogs and just those little touches that bring us to that place, to Artsakh Paseo, I think are really good. And paying homage to it is, I think, absolutely necessary. And I'm in favor of all of that. So,
Great, thank you.
my ideas.
Any other comments before we move to the next section?
Are we going to have that statue somewhere in Artsakh? The mom and pop statue? Something like that?
Do you want it?
Is that
want it?
symbolic of Artsakh?
This is the
symbol of it. I mean, that's represent Artsakh anyway. That's
I like
when
But
you
we
go
should
to
have
Artsakh,
something
that's
original
like that.
what you see.
Yes, I like that.
So maybe we have to incorporate that. I don't want to say how big. Maybe you have to look into it. But if you would have some sort of that symbol, will be great.
I'm personally not a big fan of replicas, and this thing is in Artsakh. One of the joys of going to Artsakh is being able to go and see it and photograph. I mean, this thing's ginormous.
Well,
Yeah,
even more
that's very
important,
large.
but even more important for those of us that haven't been there to
have a replica of
experience
it?
that.
That's a
Yes,
replica of
yes.
small size of what they can see when they visit Artsakh, so
Mm-hmm.
that will be great if you would put that. Or, I mean, I
an
And then I
idea.
would go down there and look at that and say, I want to see the real deal. So maybe
It's an idea that maybe.
Yeah.
It's an idea.
I like that idea of some sort of a an icon is what I was saying.
Okay, and
nice.
and that builds upon some of the comments of, paying homage, at least providing some sort of context then and further explanation about Artsakh and what this means, and then intertwining, it sounds like an international artisanal market, essentially. Okay, so we will move on now, and I assure you, this is the really fun part. Some of the big moves. So these are the large-scale design elements, and I'm going to turn this over to Bradley to provide more info.
So it was great that you started down that path of, big sculptural elements that could go in that harken back to Artsakh or just as an international destination in general. And there's a number of things we could do. And one thing I would actually caution is when we're looking at these big moves is that they don't have to be discrete. We can scale these as appropriate. If you see something in here that you like that you think should be the large, overwhelming attraction kind of move for this space, but you like others, we can find ways to scale those down. We can find ways to create threads. The reference to the dogs actually is quite unique. Chicago has done something with pigs, if I'm not mistaken. Other cities have done things with frogs and cows and these little statues, but they become these kind of whimsical elements. So when we say big moves, they could still be something small if it's something that becomes kind of a common thread that moves through. But one of the things we have to consider with this is how do we design the space for that? Do we want this to be a larger formal space? Formal seating areas organized around a formal centerpiece. In the case of the image to the left, there's a large fountain there. So it's a very kind of formal, organized plaza in the traditional sense. But if you look at the images to the right, these are less formal. They're much more open and flexible. And while some of them may actually seem kind of empty, aside from the people that are in them, they can be programmed in many ways. That's a good way to think about the kind of temporary improvements that could be made, or the rotating art or rotating programming that could occur. So the idea that this space could be designed in a more rigid sort of sense, organized around a certain type of use that you would like to see, or something that remains flexible that we can continuously come in and change this as need be. Other elements include pedestrianizing the street. And Councilmember Devine, you might recall from the recent meeting at the Royal Canyon, we had discussed some of these raised intersection concepts. And these can be great concepts for gateways, anchoring both Wilson and Harvard, or maybe even mid-block somewhere. But even more importantly, it slows down the traffic that moves in there, ensuring that it's a safe space. If we were to allow, or if we were to create a space for children or play area, this ensures that the traffic would move a little slower through the area. But it's not just about that utilitarian sense, but it's also a design sense. Those raised intersections as you move through can become a design thread. They can become a gateway as you move from one block into another, as you're entering from the library or whether you're entering from Lemley Theater. And in this case, you see different paving is expressed. Of the image there on the right in Sacramento, it becomes a little more playful. You can do interchangeable, essentially horizontal murals in that sense, that they can be painted, they can have vinyl wraps on them. San Jose actually does this on one of their pedestrian walks, is they have a vinyl sort of application along every intersection. It's something you can change out every few years as it wears down. So one year it could be a certain theme, another year it could be a different one. But this is a little bit of a smaller scale move compared to the idea of how the entire street could be pedestrianized. And we could do that in several ways. We could do it in ways that could apply temporary improvements, sort of overlays to the paving, or we could go in and raise that entire street, elevate the role of the pedestrian in there, minimize the role of the automobile, and make this a more pedestrian and cyclist, or really pedestrian, because this street's not large enough for cyclists. But by default, always talk to multimodal. But it could really focus on the pedestrian here and really slow down that space. And that move itself, by raising that street, by changing the paving, by applying art design threads, could become that big move. As you move through this space, that sort of becomes a thread. It moves you from one end to the other. I think that's one of the great opportunities here is you have multiple blocks, and the idea that you can move someone through this space, those two anchor points, the library and the theater, and what happens in between. That's part of the great opportunity here is this is a space that someone could use from end to end. It's not just a single node destination.
So can I stop you for 1 second? So I love these renditions and these solutions that I found. Even just visually looking at it, you understand how this calms traffic, and I think perceptually you all of a sudden think of this as pedestrian space as opposed to traffic space. But I'm trying to understand the concept of raised crosswalk.
So essentially the intersection, you can do it with the crosswalk itself as well, that kind of narrow 6-8 foot strip where you connect across the street, or you could do it with the entire intersection. They essentially refer to it as tabling, and you bring it up by 6 inches, and you slope the ends, and essentially you can treat that as a canvas. That can become some sort of gateway. You can apply some sort of art to there. It doesn't impact traffic all that much. I think an initial knee-jerk reaction is to say that would slow down traffic a lot. There was actually a study done out of, I believe it was the University of Texas, or maybe it was Texas Tech, that found that it actually only slows down those that are traveling in about the 90 to 95th percentile, and that means those that are speeding. So those that are traveling at a normal speed, they're perfectly fine, but it does tend to slow down those that are speeding, which is a good thing, obviously. But what it also does, there's a psychological element to it as well. It raises the profile of the pedestrian. They feel like they're on the same level playing field as all the other modes that are around them. Drivers tend to be a little more aware as well, especially if you articulate that in some sort of artistic way. There's some very interesting ones that actually came out of Iceland where they painted the crosswalk as 3D, so if you're standing back, it actually looks like it's elevated. And it was amazing the kind of impacts that it had on drivers because they thought there was something blocking the road, and they would slow down a bit. So in addition to that, as we had mentioned, there could be opportunities to close sections of this street, and that could be a very substantial move. And what we do with those spaces, we've talked about playgrounds and how that could be befitting for children, but it could also be a performance space. This is the Arts and Entertainment District. We can develop a programming element to this that could have rotating artistic performances, but there does need to be some sort of forum. So in some of these examples, you see amphitheater-like seating, you see informal squares essentially where dancing or other performances could occur, but it could be something that becomes an attraction and kind of a node and a destination for performance-based art, not just about sculptural-based and the physical art, if you will. We have heard references to water features, and that can be done in a lot of ways, but the more interactive it is, the better you can make that space. We do currently have water features there now, but they're not used, and they're rather modest in scale. You can do something much more formal, as seen to the left in Toronto, or something here on the right in New York. This is the kind of water feature that a child can run through or walk through, and it activates that space. Not pictured here, the blocks in Chicago, if you're familiar with those. It's two very large sculptural elements where they project images of faces, and then water actually spews out of it. And if you actually go there, there's the water comes out at a certain time, and the children know. And just before that water comes spilling out, to watch these children just rush and flood this space it's quite entertaining and fun. Adults usually just sit around and watch that, but it pairs well with adult activities. There's bars and restaurants that are around it as well. So it really helps activate it. And making a green space. This is we have great palm trees that are already there. The question that can be raised, do we want to preserve those and build around those? Do we want to keep those as an anchor point, but do we want to enhance that green feature as well and that sustainability? And that can be done in a lot of ways. We can make permanent changes to incorporate landscape, natural landscape, local landscape. You can do temporary things such as that image in Montreal, and I believe actually in San Jose they did something similar at the San Pedro market, is they essentially would roll out sod periodically and create a green space. They did that during the Super Bowl and created a football field in the middle of the street. So when we're thinking of these things, even these big moves, they don't always have to be permanent. They can be temporary as well. And then as we just referenced a moment ago, art. And that can happen in a couple ways. In these instances, these are sort of like art walks. It's something that's overhead. In the case of this, we've seen several images before, I think, of the umbrellas that hang over alleyways, but a way to add a pop of color, but it also adds another dimension by providing a sense of enclosure, if you will. In the case to the right, this is more of a vertical and illuminated installation. Illumination is another thing to really take into consideration, whether it comes to art or even the design of the fixtures that go into it. But again, it's that thread. Or you could have that large anchor, something that's at the center, something that's at each end of the entrance or one of the ends, that's sort of a gateway. And that could be something that speaks back to Artsakh. It could be something that speaks local to Glendale. It could be many different things. One thing we would actually bring to mind when it comes to art is to think of that as something that's rotating as well. These ideas of kind of temporary improvements, maybe they last 6 months, maybe they last 5 years, but the idea that things can change over time as well. But also gateway signage. Is there a way to brand this with Artsakh in a large visual manner as you're entering this? Could it be something that's over the street? Could it be the large letters as seen in Azalea? We've seen that used in Amsterdam and other cities as well. But could this be a way to brand the city, to brand the street, to brand the entire environment? So from there, we just open it up to any comments or questions around some of the big things that could happen along this street.
Comments, questions, Mr. Barberton?
Just gonna go over a couple of points quickly. Water features, I'm okay with it. Illumination, I think, will make a huge difference. And as far as the current ambiance that we have, I think I love the trees that are there right now. I think removing them is gonna just really destroy the character that it has right now. Also, the closed area that we have, the large area from sidewalk to sidewalk, I think we need to look into it if you want to have one way in and one way out from the parking lot, because right now we have two accesses, and do maybe a traffic study and find out if it's only one way in and one way out. Have, again, two lines coming in and two lanes coming in and 2 lanes exiting is the same concept basically. So we can keep the closed area that we have from sidewalk to sidewalk. Because we had that, the event, when was it, couple of months ago.
Do you do the Smart Fest?
Yes, and you could tell that if you don't have that wide area, having an event like that, it's the rest of it, the one side of the street and the sidewalk was kind of narrow. I think that will just give us opportunities to do a better events. Also, the divider that you were talking about, I think the median will be that divider. I don't know if the goal is to rip off the street on one side and make it same level as the sidewalk. Is that what we are envisioning, or can we keep it the way it is right now? Is it wise to keep it the way it is right now? And I'm asking maybe the consultant to look into it as well. So we don't tear up the street and say, oh no, we should have done it on the other side, and we already removed everything. So I think that's something they need to look into. I think that's it. And also one more thing about the green space that we were talking about. All of the side alleys that we have, as well as the private ones, like the one that we have on next to Mona. I know it's further down, but we had this. The design was that is it a Clayton plumbing sign, and it has a faucet and it's dripping water, but it's dripping water into nowhere basically. That was supposed to be a water feature in the beginning, so it was cascading water feature, and somehow it didn't happen. I think we need to look into items like that. Maybe we can enhance those and tie them all together, so it would be because right now it's dripping water into the landscape areas that I think it's all drought tolerant material. So I think if we can bring that back to the original idea, that would be a great feature that will enhance that area as well. And the museum coming, it's right up against, it's right across the street from it, or across the alley from it. So, and iconic art pieces, I like them all. I mean, we can't wait to see the results for the next presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Rajan?
I'm trying to understand. Okay, we're gonna have this Artsakh Street will be one way, possibly from north to south?
Correct.
Because from south to north will be very difficult.
Correct.
Will be one lane?
Yes,
Sorry. I mean, I disagree with that, but I guess that's one idea.
No, because it will be very
No,
difficult
but it
otherwise.
also because running north to south means that the alleys that are mostly on the west side will be less accessible to the pedestrians.
That's all right. That's not my question, but it will be one-way street, whether south to north or north to south, right?
correct. They are investigating the one-way street as part of the
Okay.
the RFP.
Now, in the middle of that street is blocked. Both sides of the street has been used for pedestrians, right?
Correct.
We will open up, let's say, the east side of that street. Right now, on Artsakh Street, the middle.
Where there's no cars,
So if
correct?
you want to open up, so it means that where they were sitting now, half of it will be street. All right?
Not necessarily.
Then how
And,
it's gonna
and we haven't quite gotten to that point of making that decision, but we need to evaluate what are the best opportunities here, because we do have multiple entrance and exit points for the garages. There may be opportunities to close larger sections, but I think going forward, it'd be to enhance the existing condition, not to add more opportunities for cars necessarily, but to build upon the success of that area as a people space.
You didn't answer my question, I'm sorry.
It's
That area, seating area which exists now,
correct.
half of it will be open,
Not necessarily. And that's part of what needs to be studied.
but then how you can have a street there? If you don't open up, then it will be right now, like exactly what we have now. They will enter from Wilson or Broadway, and they end up to the parking lot.
It could be.
So one of the recommendations that Councilmember Garpetian had was the idea that you could possibly go inside of the garage and still maintain the paseo. So that's something that could be looked at while still preserving a one-way or creating a one-way. But another option is, which again, we will take a look at because traffic studies will be important to this, is the idea of still creating a one-way and perhaps having bollards so that you could have, if you do have a special event like a Dia de los Muertos, you can raise the bollards and still have that open space. What we've seen is that the paseo, it is utilized, but it is not always heavily utilized. So that would be one of the considerations as well.
But this is, I have a problem with that. Let's assume it's one way street, if that's what you're going to come to. So everybody will enter from Wilson. Doesn't matter if we can consider from Broadway, but let's assume we enter from Wilson. We come to the parking lot. I will enter the parking lot, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that portion of the pedestrian area will be, it's not going to be connected to the north part of that street. So there, because people are coming and getting into the parking lot. So what you have now will not be connected to the north part.
Correct. It will
that
be
street.
disrupted.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, and I enter the parking lot. If I'm leaving the parking lot, then I enter again to that one lane street.
Correct.
The people that are coming to enter from the south side to the parking lot will be such a jam when you want to get out and get in. I
So-
mean, you have to consider this. One-way street going to create lots of problem to enter to the parking lot and to get out of the parking lot.
And I appreciate this feedback, and it's part of what we've tasked Studio 111 to do. The traffic studies is a big component of this. When we had this discussion a few months ago, that was our recommendation from the City Council to look at the one-way as well as other alternatives. So if they find that the one-way just simply does not work because there are undue hardship to the pedestrians and to the drivers, then we will look at another alternative. So we will expect that to come out of the traffic studies.
I understand some sort of street we have in there because we have to enter to the parking and exit from the parking. There's no other way, right? Have you studied if we can get to the parking any other way other than what it is now, that you have to enter to Artsakh Street and go inside the parking and getting out of the parking? We have no other solution. We can't enter to the parking lot from the back side.
Correct. So we did go through an exhaustive analysis of this before. Those parking garages, it's challenging because it's not to say that it's impossible. With enough money, anything is possible. But there are some limitations with the alleys that some of the service alleys where you could possibly pop out one of the walls and create an additional entrance and exit for the parking garages. That is ultimately how we ended up with the conclusion and recommendation of let's look at the one-way. And I think the option of either doing the one-way as a throughfare where you could possibly enter into the garage, or as Councilmember Garpetian recommended, considering that option of leaving the Paseo as it is, and then you can use that parking garage as an outlet.
That's what I'm trying to say. If you don't leave that center Paseo, this will be impossible to get in and out of that parking unless you find a way from the back of that parking lot somehow to manage to create an entrance and exit from the parking. Otherwise, you can't block that, make it one-way street. It will be impossible to use. This is my professional opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, so a little background on that. You know, initially when I was talking about this Paseo, Maryland Paseo, my conversations, which many of you were privy to, this is back 2013, with our former city manager, you know, I was assured that with money, we would be able to shut down those 2 blocks entirely. For traffic, we would basically open an entry onto the northern parking lot, not the southern parking lot. So that's the parking lot between Wilson and Broadway. And we would be able to shut down both blocks to traffic entirely. Years later, money materialized, but then I was told that, okay, it's impossible to shut down, or it's at least cost prohibitive to create an opening. I assume that's still the case. Is that still the case? Okay. So
Yes.
The initial estimates were woefully low, and turns out it's impossible to do. At this point, in order to get this done somehow, we're told, we have to have traffic, some type of traffic on those 2 blocks or on portions of those 2 blocks to make the parking lot, at least the northern parking lot, accessible. So there's someone in charge of doing the traffic engineering, right? This has to be a component of this project. I think
Absolutely.
that's what staff is telling us. There are professionals who do this for a living, who are going to look at all the options and then present it to us for us to basically choose. I mean, we can sit now and start engineering the street for the next 5 hours. I'm just not sure that's what's in front of us and whether we have the professional know-how. I certainly don't. Maybe you do, Councilmember Ajanian. But I think let's see what they're going to bring back. If it's impossible, as you say, then it's impossible. That's sort of self-explanatory. But I think they seem to think that it is possible. They being staff, with all due respect. So staff and our consultants. So when they come back, we'll look at it. We'll see.
So
Did you have
if I
something?
can
Yes.
just, for this section, just so I get my 2 cents in here, I've lost count. I think when we talk about public spaces for events and gatherings and entertainment, I think we have to remember, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to repeat or replicate what's going to be going on at Central Park? Because we're going to be having the same activities there. I think on this street, we should concentrate more on street minstrels, and I know up in Montrose at the market, they have little spots where, a trio can play or a jazz, quartet can play. And I think that's more what I'm envisioning on Artsakh. So that would be my suggestion there, just to keep that in mind. The palm trees, I'm all for saving. I know that eventually that may not be possible. I know we've mentioned that. If that's the case, then I think these iconic art pieces are an absolute must to increase pedestrian interest. Gateway signage, I've always been in favor of that. I always envisioned a huge arch going across saying Artsakh Plaza or Artsakh Paseo. And if it's not across the street, then perhaps in that, I think it's like a paseo that goes from Artsakh to Brand, and something, a lit, what's the word I'm looking for? Signage would be, I think, recommended. Illumination, absolutely, lights everywhere, and what else do I have? Gateway signage, art piece, green, no. I'm not for, I don't know what, no. I just think that this is, we don't have space. I mean, it's not like we have a football field there. It's going to be it's a minimal, it's a setback, it's a sidewalk, and we have to make the most of it, but I don't know that we can do actual, and I think also, and I guess I should have mentioned this at the beginning, the other thing I think we ought to think about is cost. I know that's not what we're looking at today, but every time I hear these fantastic suggestions, my mind just goes to ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. So I know that eventually we'll be, we just kind of have to stay within a budget, and everything's not going to be possible. But anyway, those are my suggestions on this section.
Mr. Arjane?
Everything is possible. There is nothing impossible. You can bring from top or bottom. But the problem will be that you have to make it such that you're not going to create a traffic, whether on Wilson or Broadway, or when they want to enter the parking or exit the parking. Everything is possible. We can do everything we want. But the designs should be such that will not impact the traffic on those two streets, which are especially Wilson. There is such a traffic on that portion between Artsakh and Brand that people are having problem to cross the Brand to get into that street. If we make it only the entrance from one of these streets, still will be possible, but will be lots of hardship for the people who are around there to go on Brand or side street. That's what I was trying to say. I don't mean that will be impossible to do, but just to have one way to enter that parking will be lots of hardship.
If I may, I think the designers just have to remember that we have to maintain parking availability, traffic flow, and safety. I think we can do those three elements will be good.
Okay, thank you.
So
Yes, Mr. Najarian.
just briefly, I do think we need to have some sort of shade covering, at least in the northern part, in what we call the exchange area, and that can be incorporated into some artwork. I think, in these blazing hot, it will be blazing hot soon, and having some covering, I think, will make it much better for patrons. Mona owes us a lot of neon. Part of their operating agreement was to provide art installations throughout the city, if I remember correctly. So this may be an opportunity to keep them to their promise, whether it's art, whether it's signage, whether it's just lighting on its own. I would like to see as much non-traffic space in that northern part. I would like to see a southbound on Artsakh, right turn only into the garage, and upon the exit, only on the southern part, right turn out to get onto Broadway. That way you can have the whole eastern street of Artsakh pedestrian, with that center section also pedestrian, just a right turn in to the garage. You want to exit, go to the other side and right turn out, but we'll leave that to the traffic engineers. But that's my professional opinion. So, no one heard me either. No wonder no one was like, no wonder everyone was like, oh, okay. But those are just my thoughts, and we can dig into the details a little later.
Thank you. We got every word.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Okay, any other comments on this section? All right, some of these items now regarding arts and culture, we have already hit upon, so, feel free to move ahead. I know we've had a lot of fun for the past hour, so we'll try to move this forward. But some of the big moves will impact the direction of the art and culture, but there are some other items that you may want to consider, especially in light of the recent implementation of the Urban Art Program Plan. Gary Schaefer is available to speak more specifically to this, but we have here, this is just one of the appendice items from the plan, and you can see that the Glendale Urban Art Program Plan did make recommendations for Artsakh, and kind of the big picture items were that it recommended artist design street enhancements, temporary public art opportunities, artist design, light installations, partnerships with local artists, and using the storefronts as pop-up performance venues. Some of these are temporary, some of these may be more permanent. So there is an opportunity to implement elements of this plan, and you can also take a look at some of the other ideas, and many of which we've already discussed, into integrating the art into the arts and entertainment. These could be things like the visual art, whether it's through sculptures and wall art, also known as murals, which we know Councilmember Garpetian does not like. So we see, though, there's many examples here. There's more public art images, including mosaics, different type of using the murals, freestanding sculptures, and accessible art that encourages public participation. I think that gets to what Councilmember Devine has spoken to quite a bit today on really providing an opportunity for people to take pictures and have fun and be interactive. There's also the artist design, creative signage, or overhead art. I know that Councilmember Najarian mentioned the umbrellas. Originally, that was, I think, from Portugal. This image is from Liverpool. But this can involve other artist design signage, art canopies, and offer up a whimsy to the urban environment. Some of the other examples include digital installations and overhead art. Again, this may be an opportunity to provide some of that temporary excitement, but it may move after 6 months or even a month. And the performances. So you could have buskers, small performances, street theaters, festivals. We've actually been experimenting with these types of events on the Paseo. We slightly understand some of its capacity. So Artsakh could integrate performances of all types. We will not forget that this is part of the Arts and Entertainment District. Councilmember Najarian mentioned that we have the Museum of Neon Art, and there may be a way of incorporating other components of neon into this street. But there's also the Tufekcian Gallery, there's the Roslin Gallery, and there may be other arts and other galleries that we can further integrate into this.
I think one concept that, I'm sorry to interrupt, that we can integrate is, since we have the space, is having periodic just art sales or galleries out in the open. Just give artists the opportunity, because when you have a gallery, then the gallery kind of decides who comes in, who doesn't come in, who exhibits, who doesn't exhibit. Have a more free, libertarian concept of having artists exhibit themselves on the Paseo itself.
And if I might add, Mr. Mayor, I mentioned to Gary, our Director of Libraries, that we could have a Women in Arts on Artsakh, and have some of our commissions work together and present a fabulous art festival there, or art exhibit.
Sure.
It's a terrific place for something like that. Yeah.
Having the
I
venue, I
agree.
think, gives us the ability to do
Yes,
women in
that's right.
arts, men in
Men
arts,
in arts.
children in arts,
Right,
whatever we
yes,
want.
but it's good. Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
No, excellent. This is a perfect time to pause. I don't know if there's anything in particular that you wanted to comment on, if there's an opportunity to fold in the urban art public plan here. But I will pause.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I, unlike Councilmember Garpetian, I like murals, And when I've traveled in Europe, I see murals in alleys, and it brings the flavor of, I mean, they're in Yerevan. I mean, I saw fabulous murals on the alley, brick walls, and just gives you a kind of a good feeling about where you are. And so I'm all for murals. They don't have to be in your face on Artsakh Paseo, but they could be in the alleyways. Again, another opportunity for, we have places in LA where people, they visit just to look at the murals, because some of them are really good art. And I think we have, this is a good opportunity for us to tap into some of the artists that we have in our city. That's for sure. So I'm in favor of all of the recommendations from the Urban Art Program. I think this is a community space, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for community artists to be involved and partners. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I agree with. Turn on my. No, I agree with most of the elements that we had here. Let me see if one question that I have, we have here like cultural festivals, small performances and everything else. Is this part of our Parks and Recs division that is going to manage this? Because I think we need to control and manage what is coming, the festivals, and like they pull a permit or what have you. I think the city has to have a complete control over what's happening in Artsakh.
So over the past 2 years, we have experimented and, as you've seen, in various ways on hosting different programming, but then also allowing for outside groups to host events. And we've done that through both collaboration with economic development, with the Parks Division, and then through special events as well. Everybody is still expected to apply for a special events permit. If we, as the city, were to take a more formal approach on programming, we could do it in a few different ways. It could be time intensive. It may be something where we look to parks to do that. It could be something where we even consider contracting some of this out and having an independent group who regularly host special events, and we assign them to something like that. The idea of having a farmer's market, for example, I know that we've experimented in different locations along Brand. That may be something that we look at farming out to an independent contractor to host those. So there's different ways of doing it, but right now it's just been a collaboration of city departments.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and Councilmember Garpetian, I think you've hit an item on point as it relates to the programming piece. And once the decisions are made in terms of what the ultimate vision and the fruition of this vision for Artsakh Paseo and the alleyway ultimately become, that will also dictate what will be necessary in terms of that programming piece. And so depending on what the council ultimately decides will be dependent upon whether we recommend continuing to do it in-house, or we recommend having a hybrid where we would do a piece of it in working with somebody from the outside in terms of a contractor. So we have some thoughts on that. However, that programming piece is very important to make sure that the vision that the council sets forward doesn't kind of just lie with some of the pieces that occur in terms of art, et cetera. You want to enliven it, and with that comes the time and the effort necessary for the programming piece. And so that will be before you and a decision that would be necessary for you all to make, but that's down the road. We're not quite there yet. But we've been thinking about it, most definitely.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay.
And very important aspect of it.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments on this? So just to segue right into the next section then on programming activities, it's like you read this ahead of time here. But essentially there's two ways that we've looked at it. Actually, there's probably many more than two, but through the passive activities or through active programming. So do you want to see a place where you have passive activities where you could where you could stroll, where you have street furnishings and people can just go and hang out, and people of all ages as well. There's also ways to infuse ambient music, lighting, games. The example from San Jose is an example of that as well, where they actually have one-way streets, but there is actually a large-scale chess piece there, and other play elements. On the other hand, we can take a look and incorporate more active programming where you have regularly scheduled events and special events as pictured here. And again, some of the things that we've been experimenting on the street. In Glendale, in Pasadena, I'm not sure if we're going to have any parades, but you never know, right? The sky is the limit here. Two-block long parade, that's right.
The Days of the Verdugo's parade on Brand, yes, we used to.
But in general, the
I'm
streets
dating myself, that's for sure. I rode in that parade many years ago.
It's not fair.
So some of these have been the special events, some of these have been programmed events, but in general, streets can serve as an important civic function and can lend themselves to more programming efforts. So I will pause there. If there's anything that speaks to you on this, if this is consistent with what you've envisioned, or if it doesn't hit the mark.
So the passive activities are not, they're not exclusive of active programming, right? I mean, having one doesn't mean not having the others. We can have both.
You can have both.
We have
That's
we have the space, and I think throughout the discussion that we've had in the last hour or so, the thing that you've heard is that we want all of it. And it's just a matter of using the space well, optimally, and incorporating these elements in there, or at least creating such a venue that makes it possible to have both the passive and the active programming. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I think because this is part, like a north and south portion, and it's divided by Broadway, a portion of it can be very active, a portion of it can be somewhat passive. The south part that has bigger parking structure and has already some established businesses there and exchanges there. Exchange is kind of passive. So maybe we can look into that and see maybe portion of it can be, like the Verdugo Park, south part of it is very active and north part of it is very passive. So I think that's something we can look into.
Excellent. So that concludes the visioning part of this. As we move forward, and Council Members Devine is correct, there will be a budget element to this at some point, and there's also different ways that we can approach this. And I would like to invite Studio 111 at this point just to recap and provide us the tab. No, I'm kidding.
No, I
You
was going
won't.
to say, are they going to tell us how much we've spent so
No,
far?
but to discuss the program approaches moving forward, and then also on what to expect from here on out. So I'll turn it over to Alan Pullman.
The recap is brief. Great comments, great insights, and we're excited to get going. We haven't really started designing yet, so we're at that discovery phase. But it was important to, I think, just addressing some of the concerns of council. We know there are constraints that we will have to work around. And we discussed a lot how many of the constraints to put into this presentation. This is a very important project for the city. It's a very important project to you. So we want to start with the dreaming part. What is the vision? What's the dream? And now that we've gotten your feedback on some very specific things, I guess the recap is you want it all and no limits. We have to now figure out what we actually can do. And that would involve working with our designers, working with our traffic consultants. There are a lot of options. We've started to look at it. There's a lot of different ways of skinning the cat, so to speak. And now that we've heard this feedback, I think we're going to really come back with some thoughtful approaches of how to try to get everything that you want. I did hear from Councilmember Najarian that maximizing pedestrian space is a really important kind of component. So we're going to look at that and keep access to the parking garages and keep traffic flowing as well. And also servicing, because at that south block, There's a lot of servicing for the marketplace that needs to be accommodated. They don't have an alley like on the other side. So I think that this has been really helpful for us to hear the commentary. I guess to wrap up one piece of it, we do want to just explain that there are different approaches. We call them targeted enhancements versus comprehensive improvements. So Councilmember Garpetian asked, do we have to rip up the street to do this? And I think there's really, that's up to you as a council, how you want to proceed. And we might give you different options to actually look at when it comes to the design. But we're going to totally improve this street, but we could do it with targeted enhancements, which is building upon what's already there and preserving the things that you really want to see. Or we could do something comprehensive, which is like, we're going to restart it. And it's not an all or nothing, by the way. We have choices of how much to do. So just to wrap up, explain target enhancements. These are some images on the left from Mexico City, how they expanded the sidewalk, added lots of seating capacity by just painting out the curb. And this is similar to the pilot project you have at the Paseo currently right now. On the right, there's an existing plaza that was really made into this really wonderful space with these modular landscape and seating and lighting elements. It's not a permanent improvement, but it could become an improvement over time. And it's a way of testing ideas at a larger scale than you currently have. Next slide shows just more of these kind of, is that me to turn it, or you got it? Okay, great. Again, this is Broadway in Los Angeles on the upper left, which is a painted extension of the sidewalk, Santa Monica's street art. On the right, Lisbon's Pig Streets. Maybe you've been there. I haven't been there, but I hear it's somebody from my office just went, and they took this area that was a seedy kind of, it was the red light district, and they turned it into a very happening nightlife zone by just painting the streets. Now, it may not be the upscale vision that Councilmember Najarian mentioned. Maybe people have flip-flops and T-shirts here, I don't know. But the idea that they actually transformed an area with paint is an interesting approach. Next slide just shows some of the things that you may want to preserve, like the historic lights. And these are all images on the North Block. We didn't really show images of things on the South Block. Maybe there's not as many things to preserve there. But historic streetlights, the palm trees. We have looked at the palm trees. Palm trees are fairly movable. So if we decide that we want to reconfigure the street but keep the palm trees, we could move them. They have fairly easy routes to move. The water feature, I don't think anyone wants to keep that water feature, but it is there. Paving, you do have some really lovely paving, brick and granite. It's a big investment. Are there things that you want us to make sure that we preserve as we design this going forward? But there's also the option of starting again. We showed some images, I think, of London where the street was all beautifully paved and it was all even and traffic flowed. And there's an image of something like that in Buenos Aires on the right, or in the Netherlands on the left, where you've really created a very pedestrian, calm traffic street. There are no curbs, and it's a beautiful experience for all users. Some more examples of that: West Palm Beach on the left with some nice paving and landscaping. This is the approach Santa Monica did when they redid 3rd Street Promenade in the late 80s. Halifax on the lower left with some new paving and landscaping. That's a one-way street there. I think we have some other examples. There could be opportunities to totally pedestrianize parts of the street, and that's what the Copenhagen example, it's a very famous shopping street in Copenhagen, where we could create a really wonderful fountain maybe. There's another example, Seattle on the right. So I guess what we want to hear from you is, without knowing what the design is, are you comfortable with an incremental approach, or does it seem we have a lot more opportunity to restart, but a lot more money and not much testing? We could get it right or wrong. We hopefully get it right. I think our team wants to hear from council if you have a direction or a particular approach that you feel more comfortable with.
I think you have it here in your presentation. Use what we already have there and build on it. And I think that's the approach that I would take. So you won't, because we all have, as was mentioned, budget constraints, and it's always easy to tear the whole thing off and throw it away and start from scratch. But I think the way it is, the ambiance, we all we got used to it already. And I think we can build on it and make this a very nice place for everyone to enjoy and use. So I would keep everything the way it is and build it.
Me too. Targeted enhancements.
Likewise.
Yeah, I think we all agree that the bones are very nice on that street. The foundation is there. It's already attractive. It just needs that special tweak, special touch. And again, different portions of the street may need something different depending on how what the vision is for it and what the programming is going to be. But in the absence of limitless resources, it's hard to go with the overhaul option again, because why do that? It's already, the foundations are there.
Right. And Mayor, I do think that also the thing we heard is there was a acceptance and actually an embrace of, there's different zones and so with different aspects to them, different activities, and so I think that'll help us when we look at our targeted enhancements. Right. Okay, so I guess we just want to wrap up with next steps. We appreciate all of this feedback and insight. We're going to be talking to some additional stakeholders in this month of March, including business stakeholders, the Business Improvement District. And then once we have some of that additional stakeholder input, we'll start with some conceptual designs probably in April. And once we have some things that we'll work with staff on, I think our next step is to come back to you in May with some concepts for you to give us your feedback and ideas, and hopefully we'll select a direction to go in and move forward with this exciting project.
And I'd like to add, given the council's interest in utilizing elements of the urban art public plan, that we would also include the Arts and Culture Commission and make sure to present to them as part of the stakeholder outlook.
At what stage will you present it to them?
Should the council feel appropriate, we could do that following this meeting, and to have the commission at least be aware of what our intentions are.
Sure.
And to solicit any additional feedback.
I'd like that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's fine.
So with that concludes our.
If you can also, sorry for that, Jen, if you can cover for us again who the stakeholder meetings will be held with so that we all know. So the businesses in the area.
Yes, the businesses in the area, there's many property owners, some of which will be seriously impacted should we move forward with one-way streets. We would also like to host a charrette in one of the units on Artsakh as a way to get further opinion. The Downtown Glendale Association and the Arts and Culture Commission. So those are the primary folks that we've targeted. We're fortunate to have much feedback out of the urban art public program plan, about what residents would like to see in that area. So we intend to use some of that information as well.
And what shape did that feedback take? How do they communicate their input? How do they convey their ideas?
Pardon me. During that plan, I think they had a very active, there was an online component. They also did a number of walks as well. And forgive me if I'm forgetting anything, Gary can chime in, but I know that they seemed very proud of the number of residents that came out and were supported their different opinions about public art.
Okay. Very well. Have you heard everything that you needed to hear from us?
Yeah, well, we're going to summarize what the feedback is and convene with staff to just go over that. But I think we heard some really positive and exciting ambitions, and I think we have enough information to take this and move to the next step.
No, I catch myself on the thought that maybe we're trying to micromanage too much, and we're talking about specifically what type of music we'd like on there and what type we wouldn't. I kind of don't like that idea because, who says that, tango is okay and salsa is not, or reggae is okay and something else isn't. Again, I think we should concentrate on the type of things we want to do on that street, and then life will dictate, how it progresses. And again, something that's okay this year may not be so desirable 5 years from now, and so on and so forth. So don't feel strangled or hamstrung by anything that we've said. Again, you're the consultant. You heard a lot of constructive ideas from the city council. Just take it and make it better.
I think that's a good ending point.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Jennifer, for this nice presentation. This is very exciting. I think the reason you're hearing so much, and a lot of it is divergent sometimes, is because we're so invested and so excited about the street and the potential that it holds. And we really want this to succeed. And that's why all of this is happening. So thank you.
There's a motion at 1A.
Yeah, receive and file?
Note,
file.
motion to report and file the discussion and the workshop results.
Second.
May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmembers Agajanian?
Yes.
Devine?
Yes.
Garpetian?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Mayor Sinani?
Yes. And adjournment is next?
Adjourn.
We're adjourned at 4:32 p.m.
Man.